The Whitmore Country Club looked exactly as I remembered it. Pristine white tents dotting the manicured lawn, champagne towers catching the afternoon sunlight, a string quartet playing something classical that blended into the background noise of polite laughter and clinking glasses. 200 of the city's wealthiest donors had gathered for Victoria's annual charity fundraiser. This year's cause was printed on elegant banners throughout the garden, supporting our veterans. The irony wasn't lost on me. I walked through the entrance with a slight limp, my left leg still protesting every step. The scar on my forearm was visible below my sleeve, pink and raised, a permanent reminder of what happened aboard the USS Gerald R. Ford 6 weeks ago. I probably shouldn't have been here. My doctors had advised rest. My physical therapist had used words like foolish and premature. But when I'd heard about this event, about Victoria standing on a stage talking about supporting veterans while I lay alone in a hospital bed for 15 days, something inside me demanded I show up. I spotted her immediately. Victoria stood at the center of the garden, holding court in a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than most enlisted sailors make in a month. She was mid-speech, her voice carrying across the crowd with practiced elegance. "Supporting our troops isn't just a cause for us," she was saying, one hand pressed to her chest in a gesture of sincerity. "It's personal. My own stepdaughter serves in the Navy, and we know firsthand how important." Her eyes found me across the garden. For one beautiful moment, her composure cracked. The smile froze on her face. Her hand dropped from her chest. Then she recovered. "Elena," she rushed toward me, arms outstretched, voice pitched perfectly for the crowd to hear. "Oh, sweetie, I didn't know you were out of the hospital. You should have called." She embraced me carefully, and I felt the stiffness in her body, the calculation in her movements. This wasn't a hug, it was a performance. "We were so worried about you," she continued, pulling back to look at me with what she probably thought passed for maternal concern. "When did they release you?" 4 days ago." 4 days, and you didn't tell us?" She turned to the nearest guests, shaking her head with a practiced laugh. "That's our Elena, so independent. She had a little training accident, but you know how she exaggerates, always wanting attention." The words hit me like a physical blow. Training accident, exaggerates, wanting attention. A woman nearby tilted her head sympathetically. "Oh dear, were you injured badly?" Before I could answer, Victoria waved her hand dismissively. "Nothing serious. Desk work can be surprisingly hazardous, apparently." She laughed, and a few guests chuckled along with her. "But she's fine now, aren't you, sweetheart?" I stood there, feeling the phantom pain in my spine where 3 vertebrae had been fractured. Feeling the weight of the Bronze Star, I'd earned coordinating 18 combat operations. Feeling the ghost of shrapnel that had torn through my side while I shielded a teammate from an explosion. "I'm managing," I said quietly. Chelsea appeared at her mother's elbow, phone in hand. I caught a glimpse of her screen. Vacation photos from Cabo, Victoria in a bikini by the pool, my father holding a margarita. Time-stamped 12 days ago. While I was lying in a hospital bed, learning to walk again, they were posting beach selfies. Chelsea leaned toward her friends, not bothering to lower her voice. "Watch, she'll milk this injury for months. It's so embarrassing." I felt my father's presence before I saw him. He was walking toward me, face uncertain, and for one moment I thought maybe he would actually come to me, actually acknowledge what had happened, what they had done. But Victoria intercepted him smoothly, hooking her arm through his and steering him toward a group of donors. "Robert, the Hendersons want to discuss that property development. You know how important this is." He glanced back at me once, then he let her lead him away. I stood alone in the middle of 200 people, and the isolation was so complete it felt physical. Guests who had been moving toward me suddenly found other directions to walk. Conversations near me grew quieter, then louder as people tried to pretend I wasn't there. Aunt Patricia materialized beside me, her lips pressed thin with disapproval. "You shouldn't have come," she said flatly. "You're making Victoria uncomfortable on her big day. After everything she's done for veterans, and you show up looking like that, trying to make her feel guilty." "I spent 15 days in the hospital. I said, keeping my voice steady. No one came. We didn't want to overwhelm you with visitors. She said it like it was obvious, like I was being unreasonable for expecting my own family to show up when I was injured. Victoria said you needed rest. Victoria said, Victoria always said, and they always believed her. 15 days taught me who my real family was, and it wasn't the people who shared my blood. Standing there in that garden, surrounded by strangers who avoided my eyes, I found myself drifting back through the years. Memory has a way of surfacing when you least expect it, and as I watched Victoria laugh with her wealthy friends, I remembered exactly how we got here. I was 8 years old when my mother died. Cancer took her slowly, piece by piece, until the woman who used to dance with me in the kitchen couldn't even lift her head from the pillow. I remember holding her hand in the hospital, feeling her fingers go cold. I remember my father standing in the corner of the room, already looking lost. He remarried Victoria within 2 years. At first, I tried to make it work. I made Victoria cards for Mother's Day. I called her Mom just once to see how it would feel. She laughed, not a kind laugh. The kind that lets you know you've said something ridiculous. Oh, sweetie, let's not get confused. I'm your father's wife, that's all. That was the last time I tried. What followed was a systematic campaign to push me out. Boarding school at 11. Summer camps every year. Every opportunity to send me away was framed as a gift, and my father never questioned it. Victoria's daughter Chelsea stayed home. She got private tutors and a car for her 16th birthday. I got care packages sent to whatever institution I was being stored in that season. When I was 17, I announced at dinner that I was enlisting in the Navy. Not college, not the family business. The Navy. I wanted to serve. I wanted to be part of something bigger than this suffocating house. Victoria laughed. She set down her wine glass and looked at my father with amusement. Robert, your daughter wants to play sailor. My father barely looked up. You'll be back in 6 months. Basic training will knock that nonsense out of you. But I wasn't back in 6 months. I made it through boot camp with the highest scores in my division. By 23, I was a commissioned officer. When I called about my OCS graduation, Victoria answered. Anyone can do basic training, Alina. It's not exactly an achievement. Officer candidate school wasn't basic training, but I didn't bother explaining. Nothing I accomplished would ever be enough. My first deployment was aboard the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower. 6 months in the Persian Gulf, coordinating logistics that kept thousands of sailors equipped and ready. I called home when I could, but the conversations always followed the same pattern. It's very selfish of you to put us through this stress, Victoria would say. She never asked what I was doing, never asked if I was safe. After a while, I stopped calling. It was easier than hearing the relief in my father's voice when he handed the phone back to her. The years blurred together. Deployments, promotions, evaluations that glowed with praise. By 30, I was a lieutenant commander. By 32, I was selected for one of the most elite positions in the Navy, liaison officer to SEAL Team 7. That doesn't happen by accident. You have to earn the trust of men who operate in the most dangerous environments on Earth. You have to prove, over and over again, that you belong there. My team started calling me Commander V. When I coordinated operations, people lived. The Yemen mission was classified. 3 American contractors held by hostile forces off the coast. Diplomatic channels had failed, so we went in quiet and we went in fast. I was on the command vessel, coordinating the extraction when everything went sideways. An explosion tore through the extraction point. I saw Senior Chief Martinez caught in the open, shrapnel heading straight for him. I didn't think, I just moved. 3 pieces of metal buried themselves in my side while I shielded Martinez from the blast. I woke up in a naval hospital with a bronze star on my record, and 3 families sending thank you letters to a woman whose name they'd never know. None of that meant anything to Victoria. The birthday that finally broke me was my 30th. I was deployed, stationed aboard the USS Gerald R. Ford. It was 300 local time when I called home. Victoria answered my father's phone. Alina, do you know what time it is here? I just wanted to talk to Dad. It's my birthday. He's busy. We have the Hendersons coming for dinner. Call back some other time. She hung up. I sat in my quarters aboard one of the most powerful warships ever built and cried like I was 8 years old again, holding my mother's hand as it went cold. That was the last time I asked my family for anything. The accident happened 2 months ago. Routine training exercise aboard the Ford. We were running fast rope drills when the cable system failed. A young sailor was directly below. I saw it happening and made a choice. I pushed him out of the way and took the fall myself. 3 vertebrae fractured, 6 hours of surgery, weeks of recovery ahead. When I woke up in the Naval Hospital, I asked if anyone had called. The nurse checked her records. Your commanding officer has called 3 times. Several members of your team have requested visitation. What about my family? She hesitated. I don't see any calls from family, Commander. I gave her Victoria's number. Voicemail, my father's number, same thing. Finally, on the second day, Victoria called back. Alina, I just heard, are you okay? Her voice was thick with practiced concern. How serious is it? 3 fractured vertebrae. I'll be here for at least 2 weeks. Oh, honey, listen, I'm going to fly out there tomorrow, okay? I'll be there first thing. For one moment, I let myself believe her. For one moment, I was 10 years old again. Thank you, Victoria. Of course, sweetheart, family is everything. Tomorrow came and went. So did the next day and the next. I watched that hospital room door for 15 days, waiting for it to open. No one came. On day 7, my nurse showed me the photos. Victoria in a bikini, cocktail in hand. My father beside her, smiling at the camera. Cabo, time-stamped that morning. They were never coming. They had never planned to come. The only visitors I had were my team. Martinez, still bandaged from a training injury, sitting by my bed for hours. Captain Reynolds bringing me reports to review. Young sailors stopping by with cards and awkward flowers. The doctor came in on day 12. Commander, is there anyone we can call? You've been here almost 2 weeks with no civilian visitors. It's unusual. I looked at the flowers from my team, the cards on my windowsill. Then I looked at the empty chair where my father should have been. The people who matter already know where I am, I said. Those 15 days changed something in me. Not broke. Something hardened into clarity. I understood now, with perfect precision, exactly where I stood with my family. And I understood that the men and women I served with had shown me more loyalty in 2 weeks than my blood relatives had shown me in 26 years. The string quartet started playing again, pulling me back to the present. I blinked away the memories and found myself still standing alone in Victoria's garden, still invisible to the people who were supposed to be my family. My leg throbbed from standing too long, and I shifted my weight carefully, trying not to show the pain on my face. Victoria had returned to her position at the center of the party, holding court like a queen among her subjects. She was telling some story that had her circle of admirers laughing politely, their champagne glasses catching the sunlight. I watched her perform, watched her work the crowd with practiced ease, and I felt something cold settle in my chest. Then the moment I'd been dreading arrived. Victoria stepped up onto the small platform where the string quartet had been playing. Someone handed her a microphone, and she tapped it twice, gathering the crowd's attention with a gracious smile. If I could have everyone's attention for just a moment, she announced, her voice carrying across the garden with practiced projection. I want to thank you all for coming today. Your generosity means the world to me, and more importantly, it means the world to our veterans. Applause rippled through the crowd. I stood frozen, watching. As many of you know, supporting our troops is deeply personal for our family. My own stepdaughter serves in the Navy. She paused, finding me in the crowd with her eyes, and I saw the calculation there. The setup. Alina, sweetheart, wave so everyone can see you. 200 faces turned toward me. I lifted my hand in a small wave, feeling exposed. Alina has dedicated her life to serving our country, Victoria continued. and I could hear the subtle emphasis she placed on certain words, the way she shaped the narrative. She works in administration, handling paperwork and logistics. Not glamorous work, but someone has to do it. A few sympathetic nods from the crowd. I felt my jaw tighten. Recently, she had a little training accident. Nothing too serious, but you know how these things can be. Victoria's smile was radiant, maternal, completely false. She's always been a bit dramatic about her health, but we love her anyway. Light laughter. My fingernails dug into my palms. That's why tonight's donation is so special to me. I'm proud to announce that the Vasquez family is contributing $50,000 to veterans' causes. She paused for the applause that erupted. In honor of all veterans, including our own Alina, who serves in administration, was it? The crowd applauded Victoria's generosity. My stepmother beamed at them, basking in their approval, and I realized with sudden crystal clarity what was happening. She was using me. She was using my injury, my service, my sacrifice to make herself look good in front of her wealthy friends. While she had been posting beach selfies from Cabo, while I had been lying alone in a hospital bed learning to walk again, she had been planning this moment, this performance. $50,000 for veterans' causes. And she couldn't spare a single day to visit an actual veteran in her own family. I saw Chelsea at the edge of the crowd, phone raised. She was taking a photo of me. I could see her typing something, her lips curved in a smirk. I didn't need to see the caption to know what it would say. Something mocking, something cruel. My stepsister, the war hero, with a laughing emoji, probably. The doctor's voice echoed in my memory. Is there anyone we can call for you, Commander? I had spent 15 days alone in that hospital room. 15 days watching that door. 15 days wondering if maybe, this time, they would show up. They never did. And now Victoria was standing on a stage talking about how much she cared about veterans, while the actual veteran she had abandoned stood in the crowd with a shattered spine and a scar on her arm that would never fully fade. Something inside me shifted. Not anger exactly, something quieter, something more dangerous. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and looked at the screen. A text from Senior Chief Martinez. We're 5 minutes out. Say the word. I stared at the message for a long moment. Martinez had wanted to do something about my family for weeks. The whole team had. They'd heard about the abandoned hospital visits, about the Cabo photos, about Victoria's little training accident comments. They'd wanted to handle it, whatever that meant. I'd refused. Every time. I told them it wasn't worth it. I told them family drama wasn't their problem. I told them I didn't need them to fight my battles. But this wasn't about fighting battles. This was about truth. I looked up at Victoria, still accepting congratulations for her generous donation. I looked at my father, standing beside her, clapping along with everyone else. I looked at Chelsea, still typing on her phone, probably posting that mocking photo to Instagram right now. They thought they knew me. They thought I was the awkward stepdaughter who pushed papers on some Navy base somewhere. They thought my service was a joke, my injuries exaggerated, my achievements non-existent. They had no idea who I had become while they were laughing. I thought about the men who had carried me to the medevac helicopter in Yemen. I thought about Martinez, who had donated blood for my surgery. I thought about Captain Reynolds, who had sat by my bed reading reports aloud when I was too weak to hold them myself. I thought about the young sailors who had brought me cards and flowers and awkward jokes to make me smile. Those were my people. That was my family. And they had been waiting for this moment, waiting for me to let them show my blood relatives exactly who they had abandoned. My thumbs moved across the screen. 3 words, it's time. I sent the message and slipped my phone back into my pocket. Then I looked up at Victoria, still basking in the glow of her performative generosity, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not anger, not hurt, just clarity. This wasn't about revenge. This wasn't about making Victoria pay for what she'd done. This was about standing in my truth. This was about refusing to be diminished anymore. This was about letting the people who actually loved me show up the way they'd been wanting to for weeks. Victoria caught my eye across the garden and smiled that fake maternal smile of hers. She probably thought I looked grateful. She probably thought I was touched by her $50,000 donation and her public acknowledgement of my little Navy position. She had no idea what was coming. I stood a little straighter, ignoring the pain in my spine. I adjusted my posture, settling into the bearing that had become second nature over years of command. I stopped trying to blend in with the crowd and started positioning myself near the garden entrance, where I would have a clear view of the parking lot. 5 minutes, that's all I had to wait. After 15 days alone in that hospital room, 5 minutes felt like nothing. The first sign came exactly 3 minutes later. 3 black SUVs turned into the country club's main entrance, moving in formation with the kind of precision that only comes from military training. They weren't speeding, weren't drawing unnecessary attention. Just 3 vehicles moving with purpose, like sharks cutting through calm water. The security guard at the gate stepped forward, clipboard in hand, ready to turn away uninvited guests. I watched him approach the lead vehicle, watched him lean down to speak to the driver, watched his posture change completely in the span of about 2 seconds. His back straightened. His hand moved away from the clipboard. He stepped back quickly and waved all 3 vehicles through without another word. I felt a small smile tug at the corner of my mouth. A waiter passed by with a tray of champagne, pausing near me with a polite smile. "Something to drink, ma'am." "No, thank you. I'm on medication." It wasn't entirely a lie. I was still taking pain medication for my spine. But the real reason was simpler. I was technically still on duty. Even here, even now, I maintained the standards that had been drilled into me over 16 years of service. Old habits don't die, and the good ones shouldn't. The waiter moved on, and I kept my eyes on the parking lot, watching the SUVs pull into spaces near the garden entrance. The doors remained closed. They were waiting for my signal, I knew, waiting for the right moment. Patience was something SEALs understood better than anyone. My phone buzzed, a text from Captain Reynolds. "In position, your call, Commander." I typed back, "Hold for my signal." Victoria had descended from her platform and was making rounds through the crowd, accepting congratulations for her generous donation. My father trailed behind her like a well-trained accessory, nodding and smiling at all the right moments. Chelsea was still glued to her phone, probably monitoring the engagement on her mocking Instagram post. None of them had noticed the SUVs. None of them had seen the security guard's sudden change in demeanor. They were too wrapped up in their own world of wealth and performance to notice that something was shifting in the air around them. But other people were starting to notice. A man near the garden entrance squinted toward the parking lot. Are those military vehicles?" His wife looked over, curious. "They look official. Maybe it's something for the charity, veterans' causes and all that." "I don't think Victoria arranged for that. She would have mentioned it." I watched the ripple of awareness spread through the crowd. Whispered questions, curious glances toward the parking lot, a growing sense that something unexpected was about to happen. Victoria noticed the distraction. Her smile flickered as she tried to identify the source of the crowd's divided attention. Her eyes swept across the garden, searching for the disruption to her carefully orchestrated event. The club manager approached her, looking nervous. He was a thin man in an expensive suit, and his face had gone pale in a way that suggested he was dealing with something far above his pay grade. "Mrs. Vasquez," he said, keeping his voice low but not low enough. I could hear every word from where I was standing. "There are some gentlemen at the entrance asking for access. They're military." Victoria's composed expression didn't crack, but I saw her shoulders stiffen. "Tell them this is a private event. They'll need to come back another time." The manager swallowed hard. "Ma'am, I don't think we can tell them anything. They have credentials, official ones, and they're asking for someone by name." "Whose name?" "A Commander Vasquez." Victoria's head snapped toward me so fast I thought she might give herself whiplash. Our eyes met across the garden. For the first time since I'd arrived, I saw something other than condescension in her expression. I saw confusion, and underneath that, the first flickering hint of fear. I held her gaze steadily. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just stood there, my posture straight despite the pain in my spine, and let her see something she'd never bothered to look for before. The commander. My phone buzzed one more time. I didn't need to look at it to know what it said. I could feel the shift in the air, the electricity building like a storm about to break. Instead of checking the message, I raised my hand slightly. Not a wave, just a small gesture, barely visible to anyone who wasn't watching for it. But the men in those SUVs were watching. They'd been watching me for years. The doors of all 3 vehicles opened simultaneously. I heard gasps from the crowd as men began emerging from the SUVs. Not just any men. Navy SEALs in full dress uniform, medals gleaming on their chests, unit patches visible on their shoulders. They moved with the fluid precision of operators who had spent their entire adult lives training for moments that required absolute coordination. Senior Chief Martinez emerged first, his silver star catching the afternoon light. Behind him came Captain Reynolds, the commanding officer of SEAL Team 7, his uniform immaculate. And behind them, one by one, came the rest of the team. 20, 25, 30 men forming up in the parking lot with the kind of discipline that turns heads and stops conversations. The string quartet trailed off mid-note. Champagne glasses froze halfway to lips. 200 wealthy donors stood in stunned silence, watching as 30 of the most elite warriors in the United States military assembled in formation outside their garden party. Victoria's face had gone white. She stood frozen near the champagne tower, her $50,000 donation suddenly seeming very small compared to the reality taking shape in front of her. My father set down his champagne glass. It slipped from his fingers and shattered on the flagstone, but he didn't seem to notice. He was staring at the SEALs with an expression I'd never seen before, something between shock and the dawning realization that he had made a terrible mistake. Chelsea lowered her phone, her mocking Instagram post forgotten. For once in her life, she had nothing clever to say. I felt a warmth spread through my chest. Not triumph, exactly. Something deeper. Something that felt like coming home after a long deployment to find the lights on and people waiting. 15 days taught me who my real family was, and it wasn't the people who shared my blood, but my real family was about to make their presence known. The formation began moving. 30 SEALs marching toward the garden entrance in perfect step, their footfalls creating a rhythm that seemed to vibrate through the ground itself. Guests scrambled to clear a path, pressing against tables and chairs to make room for the wall of uniforms advancing toward the party. I watched Victoria try to calculate, try to spin, try to find some way to turn this unexpected development to her advantage. But for once, she was completely out of her depth. This wasn't a world she understood. This wasn't a situation she could control with money or manipulation or carefully crafted narratives. This was my world, and my people were coming. A woman near me clutched her husband's arm. "Those are Navy SEALs," she whispered, awe evident in her voice. "Actual Navy SEALs, what are they doing here?" Her husband shook his head slowly. "Did you hear what that manager said? They're looking for a Commander Vasquez." They both turned to look at me, really look at me, for the first time since I'd arrived. I saw the question forming in their eyes, the dawning realization that the limping woman they'd been ignoring all afternoon might not be who they thought she was. I didn't acknowledge them. My attention was fixed on Senior Chief Martinez, now approaching the garden entrance with Captain Reynolds at his side. The rest of the team fell in behind them, a wall of dress whites and hard-earned metals that seemed to glow in the afternoon sunlight. Somewhere in the crowd, I heard someone whisper, "I thought she was just a paper pusher." Another voice responded, "That's what Victoria always said, but look at how those men are walking. They're not here for a paper pusher." The formation reached the garden entrance and stopped. 30 men standing at attention, their eyes fixed forward, waiting for their commander. Victoria found her voice at last. "Elena!" Her tone was sharp, demanding, the voice of a woman who was used to being in control. "What is this? What have you done?" I didn't answer her. Instead, I began walking toward my team. The crowd parted around me like water around a stone. I felt every eye in the garden tracking my progress, felt the weight of 200 stares pressing against my back. But I kept my eyes forward, fixed on the men who had come for me. The men who had always come for me. My legs screamed with every step, but I didn't let it show. 16 years of Navy discipline had taught me how to compartmentalize pain, how to keep moving when every nerve in my body was begging me to stop. I walked with my shoulders back and my head high, and for the first time since I'd arrived at this party, I felt like myself. Not the awkward stepdaughter, not the attention-seeking invalid, not the paper pusher with the little Navy position. Commander Elena Vasquez, liaison officer to SEAL Team 7, Bronze Star recipient, the woman who had coordinated 18 combat operations and brought her people home every single time. I reached the garden entrance and stopped in front of Senior Chief Martinez. He was a mountain of a man, 6'4" and built like a tank, with a scar running down his left cheek from an operation in Afghanistan. I had saved his life in Yemen. He had donated blood for my surgery. He had sat by my hospital bed for hours, telling me stories about his kids and his wife, just to keep me company. He was my brother in every way that mattered. His eyes met mine, and I saw the fierce pride burning there. The loyalty, the love that doesn't need words because it's been forged in fire and sealed in blood. He saluted, sharp, perfect, the kind of salute you give to someone who has earned your absolute respect. Commander Vasquez, his voice carried across the silent garden like a thunderclap. The team is present and accounted for. No one gets left behind. I returned his salute with the same precision, feeling the weight of the moment settle over me like a mantle I had earned through years of sacrifice. At ease, gentlemen. The formation relaxed slightly, but their eyes remained fixed on me with an intensity that spoke volumes. These were men who had seen the worst humanity had to offer and chosen to stand against it anyway. They had watched their brothers fall. They had carried wounded comrades through hostile territory. They had made impossible decisions in impossible situations. And they had come here, to this garden party full of champagne and canapes, for me. Captain Reynolds stepped forward. He was a lean man in his early 50s, with silver threading through his dark hair and lines around his eyes that spoke of decades in service. He had been my commanding officer for 3 years, and in that time, he had never once treated me as anything other than a valued member of his team. Commander Vasquez, he said, his voice carrying across the silent garden. Permission to address the gathering. I nodded. Granted, Captain. He turned to face the crowd. 200 wealthy donors stared back at him, champagne glasses forgotten, conversations abandoned. Victoria stood frozen near the champagne tower, her face a mask of barely controlled panic. My father had gone pale as paper, his shattered glass still glittering on the flagstones at his feet. Captain Reynolds' voice rang out with the authority of a man who had commanded warriors in combat zones around the world. Ladies and gentlemen, pardon our interruption. I am Captain James Reynolds, commanding officer of SEAL Team 7, United States Navy. We are here today to escort Commander Elena Vasquez, Bronze Star recipient, Navy Commendation Medal holder, and 2-time Purple Heart awardee. A murmur rippled through the crowd. I saw heads turning, eyes widening, mouths falling open. The words Bronze Star and Purple Heart seemed to hang in the air like physical objects. Commander Vasquez has served her country with distinction for 16 years, Captain Reynolds continued. She has coordinated 18 combat operations with our team. She has been responsible for the safe return of countless American service members. And last year, she coordinated the rescue of 3 American civilians from hostile territory off the coast of Yemen, a mission that remains classified, but which I can tell you resulted in 3 families having their sons returned home safely. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the crowd. What I can also tell you is that during that mission, Commander Vasquez sustained serious injuries while protecting a member of my team from an explosion. She took shrapnel that was meant for one of my men. She nearly died so that Senior Chief Martinez could go home to his wife and children. Martinez's jaw tightened. I could see the emotion he was fighting to control, the memory of that day playing behind his eyes. He had told me once, during one of his hospital visits, that he woke up some nights still hearing the explosion, still feeling my hands pushing him out of the way. 6 weeks ago, Captain Reynolds said, his voice hardening, Commander Vasquez was injured again during a training exercise aboard the USS Gerald R. Ford. 3 fractured vertebrae, 6 hours of surgery, a recovery that will take months. He turned to look directly at Victoria, and I saw my stepmother flinch under his gaze. We were told that she spent 15 days in the Naval Hospital, 15 days recovering from injuries sustained in service to her country, 15 days during which she received no visits from her family, no phone calls, no support. The crowd had gone completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop on the manicured lawn. Senior Chief Martinez stepped forward, his deep voice cutting through the stillness like a blade. I sat with Commander Vasquez during those 15 days, he said. I watched her check her phone, waiting for calls that never came. I watched her look at that hospital room door, waiting for it to open. I watched her tell the doctors that she was fine, that she didn't need anyone, when I could see in her eyes that she was wondering why her own family had abandoned her. He turned to face Victoria directly. We found out later that while Commander Vasquez was learning to walk again, her family was in Cabo, posting vacation photos, telling relatives that she was exaggerating her injuries for attention. A gasp rippled through the crowd. I saw faces turning toward Victoria with expressions of shock and disgust. The woman who had just donated $50,000 to veterans' causes had abandoned an actual veteran in her own family. So we came here today, Martinez continued, his voice rising, to remind Commander Vasquez that she is not alone. She is not forgotten. She is not unsupported. She has a family, and we are standing right here. He turned back to me, and I saw tears glistening in his eyes, though they didn't fall. Navy SEALs don't cry in public, but they came close today. Commander V, you saved my life. You took metal that was meant for me. There is nothing I wouldn't do for you, nothing any of us wouldn't do. And if your blood relatives can't see what we see, then that's their loss. Because the woman standing in front of me is one of the finest officers I've ever served with, and I am proud to call her my sister. The silence that followed was deafening. Then, from somewhere in the crowd, someone started clapping. It was a single person at first, a gray-haired man in a Navy veteran's cap who had been standing near the back of the garden. He clapped slowly, deliberately, his eyes fixed on me with an expression of profound respect. Another person joined him, then another, then a dozen more. Within seconds, the entire garden had erupted in applause. 200 people, clapping and cheering, their champagne glasses abandoned, their polite facades dropped. I saw tears streaming down faces. I saw people nodding with fierce approval. I saw other veterans in the crowd standing straighter, their own service memories clearly playing behind their eyes. I stood in the center of it all, surrounded by my team, and felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. I felt seen. Not as the awkward stepdaughter who never fit in. Not as the attention-seeking invalid who exaggerated her injuries. Not as the paper pusher with the little Navy position. As Commander Elena Vasquez, as the woman I had become while they were laughing. I looked across the garden at Victoria. She stood frozen, her face a mask of horror. The applause washing over the crowd was not for her. The admiration filling the garden was not directed at her generous donation or her elegant party or her carefully cultivated image. It was for me, for my service, for my sacrifice. And there was nothing she could do to take it away. My father stood beside her, his face ashen. He was looking at me like he was seeing me for the first time, like 26 years of dismissal and neglect had suddenly come crashing down on his shoulders. I wondered what he was thinking. I wondered if he was remembering all the times he had let Victoria steer him away from me, all the phone calls he had avoided, all the graduations and promotions and achievements he had never acknowledged. I wondered if he finally understood what he had lost. Chelsea had lowered her phone completely now. Her face was red, and I could see her friends edging away from her, their expressions a mixture of embarrassment and disgust. Someone near her was showing something on their phone to the person next to them, probably her mocking Instagram post. The war hero joke didn't seem so funny anymore. Aunt Patricia had retreated to the far edge of the garden, trying to make herself invisible. She had spent years spreading Victoria's narrative, telling the family that I was dramatic and difficult and desperate for attention. Now she was watching that narrative crumble in real time, and she had nowhere to hide. The applause finally began to fade, and Captain Reynolds turned back to me. "Commander Vasquez, we came here to escort you, but we also came here to deliver a message." He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. "This arrived at the base yesterday. I thought you should receive it in person, surrounded by the people who know exactly what you've done for your country." He handed me the envelope. I looked down at it and felt my breath catch in my throat. It was official Navy correspondence. The seal was unmistakable. I opened it with steady hands, though my heart was pounding. Inside was a single sheet of paper, bearing the official letterhead of the Secretary of the Navy. I read the words 3 times before they fully registered. "Commander Vasquez," Captain Reynolds said, a smile breaking across his weathered face. "It is my honor to inform you that you have been selected for promotion to the rank of Captain, United States Navy. The promotion ceremony will be held at Naval Base San Diego next month, pending your full recovery." The crowd erupted again. More applause, more cheers, more tears. I stood there holding the letter, feeling the weight of everything it represented. Captain, I was going to be a Navy captain, one of the youngest in my career field, one of the few women to ever hold that rank in a SEAL-adjacent position. And my family, the family that had mocked my little Navy position for 16 years, was watching it happen. Martinez leaned close to me, his voice low enough that only I could hear. "We wanted to tell you at the hospital," he said, "but Captain Reynolds thought it would be better to wait, better to make sure certain people understood exactly who they abandoned." I looked up at him, and for the first time since I'd arrived at this party, I let myself smile. "Thank you," I whispered, "for everything." He shook his head. "You don't thank family, Commander, you just show up for them." He glanced toward Victoria, his expression hardening. Which is more than some people can say. The applause was still echoing through the garden when Victoria finally moved. She stepped forward from her position near the champagne tower, her heels clicking against the flagstones with sharp, deliberate precision. Her face had rearranged itself into something approximating composure, though I could see the cracks beneath the surface. The mask was slipping, and she knew it. "This is quite a spectacle, Alina," she said, her voice pitched to carry across the crowd. She was trying to regain control, trying to spin the narrative the way she always did. "I had no idea you'd arranged such an elaborate performance. You always did have a flair for the dramatic." The crowd shifted uncomfortably. A few people exchanged glances, clearly unsure how to react. Victoria was still the hostess of this party, still the woman who had written that $50,000 check. Old social allegiances die hard. But Senior Chief Martinez wasn't bound by social allegiances. "Ma'am," he said, his voice flat and cold, "Commander Vasquez didn't arrange anything. We did, because we heard what you've been telling people about her injuries, about her service, about her character." Victoria's smile flickered. "I'm sure I don't know what you mean." "You told people she was exaggerating," Martinez continued, his words landing like hammer blows. "You told them her injuries weren't serious. You called her position in the Navy a little job that wasn't dangerous enough for real wounds." He reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone. "We have 15 days of phone records, Mrs. Vasquez. 15 days during which you made 0 calls to the Naval Hospital, where your stepdaughter was recovering from spinal surgery. We have screenshots of your Instagram posts, time-stamped, while Commander Vasquez was lying in a hospital bed wondering why her family had abandoned her." He held up the phone, and I saw the Cabo photos displayed on the screen. Victoria in her bikini, my father with his margarita, smiling faces and tropical sunshine while I was learning to walk again. We have statements from hospital staff who asked Commander Vasquez repeatedly if there was anyone they could call for her. We have the card she received from you 3 weeks after her surgery with a generic, "Get well soon" message that looked like it was written by an assistant. Victoria's composure finally cracked. "How dare you?" she hissed, her voice losing its practiced elegance. "How dare you come into my event and make these accusations?" "They're not accusations," Martinez said. "They're facts, and every person in this garden deserves to know exactly what kind of woman they've been celebrating tonight." I watched Victoria's transformation with a strange sense of detachment. The gracious hostess was gone. The caring stepmother performance had been abandoned. What remained was something rawer, something uglier, something closer to the truth. "Robert," she whirled toward my father, her voice sharp with desperation. "Do something, say something." My father stood frozen, his face a battlefield of conflicting emotions. He looked at Victoria, then at me, then at the 30 Navy SEALs standing in formation behind me. His mouth opened and closed several times, but no words came out. For 26 years, Victoria had scripted his responses. For 26 years, she had told him what to think, what to say, how to feel about his own daughter. But she couldn't script this moment. She couldn't spin this situation. And without her words in his mouth, he had nothing. I stepped forward, and the crowd parted around me. I walked toward Victoria slowly, deliberately, each step carrying the weight of every moment I had spent alone in that hospital room. Every moment I had spent wondering why my family didn't love me. Every moment I had spent questioning whether I was truly as dramatic and difficult and attention-seeking as they claimed. I stopped 3 feet in front of her, close enough to see the fear in her eyes, close enough to smell her expensive perfume, close enough to speak without raising my voice. "Victoria," I said quietly, "you told everyone I was exaggerating, that my little Navy position wasn't dangerous, that I wanted attention." I gestured behind me, toward my team. "These men carried me to the medevac helicopter when I was bleeding out in Yemen. They donated blood for my surgery. They sat by my hospital bed for hours, for days, when no one else would. They held my hand when the pain was so bad I couldn't speak. They told me stories and jokes and reminded me why I had chosen this life." My voice remained steady, but I felt the emotion building behind my words like pressure behind a dam. "You promised to visit. You said you would be there first thing tomorrow. I believed you. I sat in that hospital room for 15 days, watching the door, waiting for it to open. I made excuses for you at first. I told myself you were busy, that you had important things to do, that you would come when you could." I paused, letting the silence stretch. "But you never came. You went to Cabo instead. You posted beach photos while I was learning to walk again. And when people asked about me, you told them I was exaggerating. You told them I was dramatic. You told them my injuries weren't real." Victoria opened her mouth to respond, but I wasn't finished. "You raised $50,000 tonight for veterans' causes," I said, my voice cutting through the garden like a blade. "You gave a speech about how personal this cause is to you, how much you care about supporting our troops. And you did it while standing 20 feet away from an actual veteran you abandoned. A veteran in your own family. A veteran who needed you and got nothing." The crowd was absolutely silent. I could feel 200 people holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Victoria's face had gone from pale to red. Her hands were shaking at her sides. The careful image she had spent decades cultivating was crumbling in real time, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. "Alina," she said, her voice trembling, "you don't understand. We didn't know it was that serious. The doctors said you were stable, and I thought—" "You thought what?" I interrupted, my voice still quiet but carrying clearly across the silent garden. "You thought that stable meant I didn't need my family. You thought that spinal surgery was something I could handle alone. You thought that posting vacation photos while your stepdaughter lay in a hospital bed was acceptable because she was stable." I shook my head slowly. "You didn't come because you didn't want to come. You've never wanted me, Victoria. From the moment you married my father, you saw me as competition. as a threat, as a reminder that he had a life before you, a family before you, a daughter who would always have a claim on his heart. Victoria's eyes darted toward my father, silently begging him to intervene. But he remained frozen, speechless, watching his carefully constructed life fall apart around him. "So you pushed me away," I continued. "Boarding schools, summer camps, every opportunity to send me somewhere else, somewhere you didn't have to see me. And when I joined the Navy, you were thrilled. Finally, I was out of your life for months at a time, years even. You could pretend I didn't exist." I took a breath, feeling the truth of these words settling into my bones. "But I existed, Victoria. I existed in training exercises and deployment zones and combat operations you never knew about. I existed on aircraft carriers and naval bases, and in hospital rooms where strangers showed me more kindness than my own family ever did. I became someone while you were pretending I was nothing." I turned to look at my father. He flinched under my gaze, but he didn't look away. "Dad, 15 days. You knew where I was, you knew what had happened to me, and you chose Cabo." His voice, when it finally emerged, was barely a whisper. "Alina, Victoria said you were fine. She said you didn't want visitors," she said. "And you believed her." I cut him off, not with anger, but with something worse, acceptance. "That was your choice. That's always been your choice, to believe whatever made your life easier, to let someone else tell you how to feel about your own daughter." I saw tears welling in his eyes. For a moment, I felt a flicker of the old pain, the child inside me who still wanted her father's love. But I let it pass. I had spent too many years waiting for something he couldn't give me. "I'm not angry anymore, Dad," I said quietly. "I'm just done waiting, done hoping, done pretending that someday you'll choose me." I turned back to face the crowd, my voice carrying clearly across the garden. 15 days taught me who my real family was, and it wasn't the people who shared my blood, it was the people who showed up. I gestured toward my team, standing in formation behind me. These men showed up. When I was alone and scared and wondering if anyone cared whether I lived or died, they showed up. They sat with me. They held my hand. They reminded me that I mattered, that my service mattered, that I was not invisible. I turned to look at Victoria one last time. "You wanted attention, Victoria. You wanted everyone to see what a generous, caring person you are. Congratulations. Now they see exactly who you are." The silence that followed my words was absolute. 200 people stood frozen in the afternoon sunlight, witnesses to a moment none of them had expected when they'd arrived for champagne and charity. The string quartet had abandoned any pretense of playing. Waiters stood motionless with their trays. Even the birds in the manicured trees seemed to have gone quiet. Senior Chief Martinez stepped forward and offered me his arm. It was a simple gesture, but it carried the weight of everything we had been through together. Every operation, every close call, every moment when the only thing standing between life and death was the trust we had in each other. I took his arm, grateful for the support. My leg was screaming now, the pain medication wearing off, but I refused to show weakness. Not here, not in front of these people. "Commander," Martinez said quietly, "your escort is ready." I nodded and turned toward the garden entrance. Behind me, I heard the formation shift as 30 SEALs prepared to move. We would walk out together, the same way we had walked into countless dangerous situations over the years. As a unit, as a family. But before I could take my first step, I heard footsteps behind me. Hurried, desperate. "Alina, wait, please." My father's voice was ragged, stripped of the polished confidence he usually wore like armor. I stopped, but didn't turn around. I heard him approach, heard his breathing heavy and uneven. "Alina, please. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know it was that serious," Victoria said. Victoria said. I finally turned to face him. "That's always been your answer, hasn't it? Victoria said I needed boarding school. Victoria said I needed summer camp. Victoria said I didn't want visitors. Victoria said, Victoria said, Victoria said." I studied his face, seeing for the first time how old he had become. The lines around his eyes, the gray in his hair, the slump in his shoulders. He looked like a man who had just realized that the life he'd built was constructed on a foundation of lies. "When did you stop thinking for yourself, Dad? When did you stop being my father and start being her puppet?" His face crumpled. "Elena, I love you. I've always loved you." "Love isn't a feeling, Dad. Love is a choice. Love is showing up. Love is picking up the phone when your daughter is in the hospital. Love is getting on a plane instead of going to Cabo." I shook my head slowly. "You might have feelings for me, but you haven't loved me in a very long time." He reached for my hand, but I stepped back. "I'm not saying this to hurt you," I said, my voice softening slightly. "I'm saying it because it's true, and because I've finally accepted that I can't make you be the father I needed. That choice was always yours, and you made it. Over and over again, you made it." "I can change," he whispered. "I can be better, just give me a chance." "I gave you chances. I gave you 16 years of chances. Every deployment, every promotion, every achievement, I hoped that maybe this would be the one that made you proud. That made you see me." I paused, feeling the weight of those years pressing down on my shoulders. "But you never did. You never even tried." I turned away from him, facing my team. "I'm done trying to earn something that should have been given freely. I'm done waiting for you to choose me. I have people who choose me every single day without hesitation, without conditions. That's where I belong now." Martinez tightened his grip on my arm, a silent show of support. Behind me, I heard my father's breath catch, heard the sound of a man finally understanding what he had lost. "Elena," his voice broke on my name. I paused at the garden entrance, not turning around. "You're the man who married my mother, Dad, but my father would have been there." I didn't look back. The formation moved around me as we walked toward the parking lot. 30 SEALs in perfect step, their boots creating a rhythmic percussion against the pavement. Guests parted before us, some reaching out to touch my shoulder as I passed, murmuring words I couldn't quite hear. "Thank you. God bless you. I'm sorry." I walked through it all with my head high, feeling something shift inside me with every step. Not closure exactly, something deeper, something like freedom. At the edge of the crowd, an elderly man in a Navy veteran's cap stepped forward. He was the one who had started the applause earlier, and now he stood at attention, his hand raised in a salute that trembled slightly with age, but carried decades of understanding. I stopped in front of him and returned the salute. "Fair winds and following seas, Commander," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Thank you for your service," I replied. He shook his head. "No, ma'am, thank you for yours." We held each other's gaze for a moment, 2 generations of Navy veterans connected by something that transcended words. Then I nodded and continued toward the SUVs. Behind me, I could hear the murmur of the crowd swelling. I heard Victoria's voice, high-pitched and desperate, trying to explain, trying to spin, trying to salvage something from the wreckage of her perfect event. I heard Chelsea's friends asking pointed questions. I heard Aunt Patricia making excuses that no one was buying. I didn't care. That world was behind me now. The door of the lead SUV opened, and I climbed inside with Martinez's help. The interior was cool and quiet, a sanctuary from the chaos we were leaving behind. Martinez slid in beside me, and Captain Reynolds took the seat across from us. "How are you holding up, Commander?" Reynolds asked. I considered the question carefully before answering. "Better than I expected, worse than I probably should be." He nodded, understanding what I meant. That took courage, more courage than most people will ever understand. "It wasn't courage," I said quietly. "It was necessity. I couldn't keep pretending anymore." The SUV pulled away from the country club, followed by the other 2 vehicles. I watched through the tinted window as the elegant garden party grew smaller in the distance. I could still see Victoria, surrounded by guests who were no longer looking at her with admiration. I could see my father, standing alone at the edge of the crowd, watching us leave. I turned away from the window. "What happens now?" I asked. Martinez smiled slightly. Now you recover. You get ready for your promotion ceremony. You let us take care of you the way you've always taken care of us." "And the team has a new tradition," Reynolds added. Starting today, no one recovers alone, ever. If one of us is in the hospital, someone will be there. Always. We're calling it the Commander V protocol." I felt tears prick at my eyes, but I blinked them back. "You didn't have to do that." "We wanted to," Martinez said. "You showed us what loyalty really means, Commander. You've earned this. You've earned all of it." The convoy made its way toward the naval base, toward the hospital where I still had weeks of recovery ahead of me. But this time, I knew I wouldn't be facing it alone. This time, my room would be full of visitors, cards, flowers, and the constant presence of people who actually cared. 3 weeks later, I received a letter in the mail. No return address, but I recognized my father's handwriting on the envelope. I held it for a long moment, feeling its weight in my hands. Then I set it aside, unopened, and turned to greet the young sailor who had just appeared in my doorway. "Commander Vasquez." He was new to the team, nervous and eager. "Senior Chief Martinez sent me to check on you, said to ask if you needed anything." I smiled, touching the unit patch on my wall. "Tell him I'm fine, and tell him thank you." The sailor nodded and turned to leave, but paused at the door. "Commander, can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "How did you know they'd come for you? The team, I mean. How did you know they'd show up like that?" I looked at the cards covering my windowsill, the flowers on every surface, the constant stream of visitors who had been coming through that door for weeks. Then I looked back at the young sailor, seeing in his face the same uncertainty I had carried for so many years. "Because they're my family," I said simply. "Real family doesn't need an invitation to show up. They just do." He nodded slowly, processing the words. Then he smiled and headed off to deliver my message. I sat back in my bed, surrounded by evidence of love, and let myself feel something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Peace. The door opened again. More visitors arrived. I was never alone again.